Hello, I'm Jenny Parks from the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2020, and you have just logged into our webinar. Today's webinar is called Veterans Without Degrees, the Benefits and Opportunities of Certifications. It's not quite time for the webinar to start, but we like to get started a little bit early so that folks can resolve any technological issues that they might be experiencing as they are transitioning to the platform. So please go ahead and use that chat box in your control panel and let us know if you do have any questions. And I show that it's 12:57 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone, and at 1 p.m. we will get started. If you have been able to resolve your technological concerns, you can also play with some of the features of our GoToMeeting platform. I thought we would see if your raise hand functions are working for you. So a question I've been asking this week in the webinars is how many of you are currently located in a place that where the temperature is above freezing today? If you can raise your hand, we'll see if that's working. Well, we've got one. Oh, a couple. Well, good for you guys. So when I got up this morning and did the first dog walk of the day, I'm in La Crosse, Wisconsin, by the way, it was -10. So I do believe we're above zero now, but probably not much. And for those of you who are just joining us, once again, this is a MCMC webinar. It is Veterans Without Degrees, the Benefits and Opportunities of Certifications. And I show it's 12:59 p.m. We will be starting the webinar in just a minute. Thank you for joining us today. We are almost there. All right, once again, please use the chat box to let us know if you are having any concerns or technical glitches. We do have folks behind the scenes who can answer your questions and try to help you. An option if you're having a lot of audio problems is to go ahead and call in with the telephone number that was part of the invitation. All right, and for those of you who raised your hands while you were located in a place where it was above freezing today, good for you. But I'm gonna unraise those hands and get started. We are official now, it's 1 o'clock. So welcome, my name is Jenny Parks. I work for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Thank you for joining us today for one of our MCMC, Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit, one of our webinars. Today's webinar is called Veterans Without Degrees, the Benefits and Opportunities of Certifications. It's Thursday, February 20th, 2020. I will remind those of you who have joined us that after the webinar, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar, as well as the slides and any handouts that are attached to it. If during the webinar you would like to offer a comment or a question, please use the chat box, and we will be monitoring those questions to make sure that we do answer them all. And then finally, when you do receive the follow-up email with the recording, there will be a survey, and we appreciate you logging on, taking a few minutes to complete that so that we can make sure we are meeting your needs with our MAC webinars. So thank you very much. I'm going to That's me. As I said, I'm the moderator. I'm the Senior Director for Policy and Academic Initiatives at MEC. Normally, your host would be Sarah Appel, the manager for the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit, but she is at one of her many speaking engagements this spring. She is a hot commodity, and she has a full dance card, so I'm pleased that she's asked me to be here with you today. We need to offer some special thanks to the many organizations that have supported us in the MCMC work, and the two big ones being the Lumina Foundation and the Strada Education Network. And for those of you who are not familiar with MCMC, It is the mission of the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit to facilitate an interstate partnership of 13 states and to translate competencies acquired by veterans through military training and experiences toward college credentials. States exchange information and share best practices in the areas of articulation of credit, certification and licensure, communication, and data and technology. The goals of the MCMC project are to assist states and post-secondary institutions in aiding military-connected students with critical life transitions from the military to post-secondary education, and then from post-secondary education to civilian employment. Another goal of the MCMC project is to increase post-secondary education completion rates by creating models for the consistent, transparent, and effective awarding of credit for military training and experience that can be scaled regionally and nationally, thereby lowering the cost of education and reducing the time to completion. And finally, the third goal of the MCMC project is to establish a strong network of support, communication, documentation, and data collection among institutions and organizations for the purpose of promoting shared interests and tracking the efficacy of efforts to enhance military-connected students' educational success. The MCMC is comprised of 4 knowledge communities and areas of practice: articulation of academic credit, the communication and outreach, data systems and technology, and licensure and certification, the last one being our focus today. Today's presenters are Nicole Torpey-Saboe, Director of Research at Strata, and Andrew Hanson, Director of Research, also at Strata. Well, thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Jenny.
I am going to, before we move forward, I am going to introduce, we have Mary and Everett behind the scenes helping us. So again, if you do need any help, they will be answering questions and helping you. So I am going to turn it over to Andrew and Nicole.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for that introduction and the opportunity to share some of our research with you today. I'm with Nicole Torpey-Saboe, who co-authored the report that we're going to speak today. A little bit about me: I am also a Midwesterner raised here in Wisconsin and an alumnus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Currently based here in Madison as well, and Nicole joins us from Denver, Colorado. We're very excited to speak with you about this issue, as many of our family and friends are veterans, including Nicole's husband, Joe. But before we take a deep dive into our research, I'd first love to tell you a little bit about Strada Education Network. We are a social impact organization that's based in Indianapolis, whose mission is to improve lives by forging clearer and more purposeful pathways between education and employment. And as a social impact organization, we work to advance our mission through several means. One, our philanthropy. We give out more than $30 million each year to nonprofit organizations. Our mission impact investments through our seven affiliate organizations, which include MZ, Kale, Inside Track, and many others. Through our original research, which is where Nicole and I work at Strata. And finally, through our national engagement work, which includes partnerships with groups like the National Governors Association and the Education Commission for the States. And a little bit about our view of where we sit in post-secondary education. So over the past 50 years, we've seen the central challenge of post-high school education in America has evolved from access to completion. And while a large majority of Americans have access to post-high school learning programs after great work of many decades, half of them do not complete a post-secondary credential of any kind by the age of 30. At the same time, not all completions are created equal. Among those who do complete, many do not believe that their education was worth the cost or that it helped them advance their careers. And so that's why at Strata, we believe that completion alone is not enough. And instead, our North Star should be what we call completion with a purpose. That is, more Americans who complete a post-secondary credential that's worth its cost, that helps them advance their career and promotes their upward economic mobility. In our view, part of the challenge is that, unlike other industries, higher education hasn't adapted to the same extent in meeting consumers' unique needs. And at Strata, we believe that a big part of the answer to advancing our mission of completion with a purpose is making post-secondary learning providers more accountable to consumers and to employers. And so in order to do that, we are working together with our network partners to build the architecture, the infrastructure, the tools, and the metrics to build that post-secondary system that is more transparent and more accountable to consumers. So our work at Consumer Insights at Strata, we're investing resources in exactly that, the infrastructure that captures consumer perspectives, in particular about how they perceive the quality and the value of their education. And over the past 4 years, we've been surveying thousands of current and former college students, as well as many employers. And we're partnering with many institutions directly to survey their alumni as well today. So far, our biggest initiative has been the Strata Gallup Education Consumer Survey. So in 2015, we partnered with Gallup and set out to interview 350 Americans between the ages of 18 and 65 every night over the phone, asking them about their educational experiences and their interests in pursuing further education, among many other topics. And after 3 years, we've built a database that has more than 340,000 responses, including more than 30,000 veterans. These are data that can be analyzed at the national level, at the state level, for many large metros, at hundreds of particular colleges and universities, and for many different demographic groups. In 2017, our friends and colleagues at the Lumina Foundation, also based in Indianapolis, learned about the work that we were doing with Gallup and expressed interest in partnering with us on a series of 3 research reports targeted towards topics and populations that both our organizations were interested in learning more about. And the second in that series of reports was about veterans. And Lumina has done a lot of really tremendous work on veterans in recent years, in particular their Veteran Success Tracker, which was a 2017 study that examines the educational outcomes of veterans who had utilized the post 9/11 GI Bill. And talking with Lumina and many of our colleagues in the field, as well as many of our friends and family who are veterans, we came to see that one of the central challenges for veterans with respect to post-secondary education is mapping the talents that they've cultivated through the military onto a civilian credentialing system. Credit for prior learning is certainly part of the solution, and we've partnered with the Midwestern Higher Education Compact and our affiliate organization, the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, or CALE, in past years, and that work has demonstrated that prior learning assessments can be very beneficial for veterans. But then we asked ourselves, given the uniqueness of the data set that we've built with Gallup, what can we analyze that would be beneficial for veterans and for the field more broadly? And what we'd settled on was investigating veterans' experiences with non-degree credentials, that is, in particular, certificates and certifications. And I think the difference between certificates and certifications is confusing for many of us, as the terms are often used interchangeably in the real world. For the purposes of our research, when we say certificate, we mean an award similar to a degree that's given out by an educational institution like a community college or any other college or university after they complete a sequence of courses. Whereas a certification, on the other hand, is something that's given out by a certification body, which is often an industry group or an association. And after a person meets a set of criteria that includes a performance assessment, which could be a standardized test, or it could be another kind of assessment. And certifications are often tied to licensure as well. Both of these kinds of non-degree credentials have been growing rapidly. There was a new report that that recently came out of Georgetown University that showed that sub-baccalaureate credentials are actually outnumbering bachelor's degrees in terms of how many are awarded each year. And 1 million certificates are awarded each year in particular. And similarly, about 30% of the workforce now has some kind of certification or license, compared to around 5% if you go all the way back to the 1950s. We think part of what's driving the rise of these credentials is the rising skill requirements in the labor market and the demands to have some kind of post-secondary credential, and also the rise of post-secondary programs that are more career-oriented in nature. And certainly certificates are both of those. Certificates are distinct from degree programs in that, yes, they're faster, cheaper, and more career focused. They typically take less than a year's worth of coursework to complete, and almost always less than 2 years. They don't include general coursework requirements. The courses are almost entirely career preparation. For certificates, for certifications, on the other hand, because the requirements are set by industry and certifications expire after a certain period of time, they have to be renewed, they do tend to be more aligned with current industry skill standards than traditional educational credentials such as college degrees. But for veterans, certificates and certifications can both seem like promising alternatives or supplements to traditional degrees. But what are veterans' actual experiences with certificates and certifications, and how do they value these credentials? And with that, I'll pass it to my colleague Nicole, who is one of the authors of the report, to share some of the insights and analyses that we learned while working on it.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew, and happy to be here with you guys today. As Andrew mentioned, I am a former military spouse. I know what that's like, and I know what it's like to go through that transition. As you know, my husband went from active duty to civilian life, and just kind of seeing that firsthand is definitely an issue near and dear to my heart. And so we're very grateful for the partnership with Lumina and the opportunity to do this report, and then to share our findings with all of you and the good work that you all are doing. And as Andrew mentioned, one of the strengths of our survey database is that we actually get to ask people about their experiences. So there's a lot of information out there about numbers of credentials or those types of outcomes, but less information about what are people's actual experience with them. So just to give you an overview of the key findings of the report. The first one is that veterans really disproportionately hold these types of credentials. And, this is maybe not surprising that the educational attainment of veterans looks a bit different simply because, the military is pretty much a parallel education and training structure. It's the U.S. military is actually the largest training provider in the country. It's just, set up under a different system that doesn't always translate those experiences into traditional educational credentials. Another thing I do want to point out, I should have mentioned previously, as Andrew mentioned, there is a lot of confusion around certificates versus certifications, even among people who have these types of credentials. So for our survey, we actually don't distinguish in this particular question. We have some more in-depth research that's on the way that is going to get more into granularity around the different types of non-degree credentials. This one, we left it as either or, simply because when we did our focus groups around the questions, even many people who have these types of credentials didn't know what to call it, didn't know which one they had. And so for this report, it's anyone who holds a certificate or a certification. And so we find that veterans hold these types of credentials at much higher rates than people who are not veterans, and that they actually they have very good outcomes from these non-degree credentials. So they're more likely to say that they would recommend their educational path to someone like them. They're more likely to be employed, and they're earning more money than other veterans who don't have degrees and don't have certificates or certifications. So we really see, among that population that doesn't have a degree, these certificates and certifications can provide a real boost. Okay, so just to give a picture of educational attainment of veterans in general, we cut this by different age groups. So these are the veterans that were in our survey, a little over 30,000 of them. And about a third of them fall into this category that we're going to be talking about in this report, which is that gray category there. So those are people who do not have a degree and they do have some kind of certificate or certification. We know also there are people who have degrees that also have certificates and certifications, but for this report, we're just focusing on that gray category of people who they don't have a degree, but they have these non-degree credentials. So then if we focus just on people, on veterans without degrees, next slide here, we see that among veterans who don't have degrees, about 57% do report having some type of certificate or certification. That's a lot higher than the percentage among the non-veteran population. So again, just looking at all these adults without degrees, a little over a third of people who are not veterans say they have these non-degree credentials, where it's 57% of veterans. So we know that anything we do in terms of, making these types of credentials more transparent and portable and stackable, all these things, it's going to have impacts beyond just the veteran population. There are, other benefits that are going to help all adults without degrees, but in particular, this is an issue that should be important to anyone who really cares about serving veterans, because this is a very common experience for veterans who don't have degrees to have these other types of educational experiences. So next, we asked them what they thought about their educational path and if they would be likely to recommend their path to other people like them. So here you see, this is just comparing veterans without degrees, those who have a certificate or certification, and those who don't. So that dark blue category is the people who strongly agree that they would recommend their educational path to other people like them. And it's a 5-point scale. So 5 is that strongly agree, and then the red is the 4 is the next highest. So you can see that those veterans, without degrees who have these non-degree credentials are having a much higher likelihood of recommending their choices and their path to other people like them. They're seeing the benefits from it. And that's really played out in the next few slides, where we look at employment outcomes and we look at income premiums that we see for these veterans with certificates and certifications. So comparing the employment outcomes, we see among this non-degree population, these veterans, if they have a certificate or certification, about 73% are working. They're employed either full-time or part-time, whereas it's about 10 percentage points lower for those who don't have a certificate or a certification. That's a pretty big difference. We also see big income differences. So for the median income, we see about a $10,000 boost among veterans without degrees who have these non-degree credentials, these certificates and certifications, versus veterans who don't. And finally, this is also, it is really depends on your occupational field as well, because we know that just as bachelor's degrees are not all created equal in terms of their employment and income effects, it's the same with certificates and certifications. It really depends on the industry that you're working in, the occupational field. And so we see, this is just a table of the occupational fields that have the highest income premiums for certificates and certifications. And then the green boxes are those occupations that are most commonly held by veterans without degrees. So you can see that many veterans without degrees are gravitating towards occupations where it really pays off to have a certificate or certification. So that top occupation there, security and protective services, has the largest income premium for people who say they have some kind of certificate or certification. Another top one is construction and mining, as well as installation, maintenance, and repair. So it really does kind of depend on the occupational field you're in, what kind of boost you see, but we see that these are occupations that are commonly chosen by veterans. Okay, here we go. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so from this report, we have come up with 4 recommendations, and these are really consistent with the recommendations that you're going to see across many people working in this field. It's not that these are new, but it's that we feel it's important to reinforce these, in particular when it comes to veterans, as well as when it comes to serving adults without degrees more broadly. The first one is that we believe that all learning counts and all skills should be recognized. So whether you acquire that skill in advanced individual training through the military, or you acquire that skill in a classroom, it shouldn't be distinguishing whether or not you're able to take those skills and actually have that be recognized in future education or employment. And especially, as Andrew said, we do employer surveys, and we see more and more that what employers are looking for are skills. Sometimes they use degrees as a proxy because we don't have a great way to demonstrate these skills in any other way, but that's, I think, where we all recognize we need to be moving is, and that takes us to that second point, that we need a better language around competencies so that they can be more transparent in terms of not just a program title, but rather what actual skills and competencies were acquired. So that way, no matter where they were acquired, it can be transparent and understandable to any type of learning provider or employer in the future. They know exactly what they're looking for. It's a real problem in particular for veterans because there's a whole different vocabulary for a lot of these military skills and occupations, when in fact they are very similar to the types of skills that you would gain through a civilian educational program. And oftentimes we just don't know how to translate them. The two worlds don't always talk to each other. The third point is that these credentials need to be portable and they need to be stackable. So portable, many times veterans are, they're not only transitioning from military service to the civilian life, they're also moving many times during their career. This is an issue for spouses as well. And so they may be starting and stopping their education at many different points in different locations, and they need to not lose ground from what they've already completed. They also need the types of pathways where they build on one another. So, we don't put our service members into tracks that are simply dead ends where they have to start all over again if they want to get to the next level. You know, how can we make a combat medic training then translate not only to EMT, but to registered nurse and to physician's assistant, and build those pathways. And then finally, the aspiration is that where possible, it would be wonderful to have more crossover both ways, partnerships between credentialing agencies, so that some military training, you know, where applicable, could actually be credentialed while people are in service, so that they know, you know, the kinds of credit they're getting, the kinds of licensures they can acquire, and that it's not this wall between the military world and civilian world. So those are the main findings we have to present to you today, but we would love to take your questions and comments.
Hello, everybody. I'm back. I'll be taking a look at the questions that people have. And I'll just start with one of my own, because I definitely have a bunch hearing all the research you've reported on, especially looking at this list of recommendations at the end. I think particularly for our military connected population and students, but also for students in general.
Yep.
This move toward looking at student outcomes, accomplishments, competency, skills is the way we are headed, and looking for a way to transcript these things and document them is very important. I know one of the things that we're looking at MEC is something called a comprehensive learner record. The idea that you can put all of these things in some type of record, and that the student would eventually own it. Have you guys done any research with that, or are you aware of any conversations to help move in that direction, particularly as it concerns veterans?
Yeah, Andrew, I don't know what you would like to contribute. I mean, what's coming to my mind is some of the work that our affiliate MZ has been doing around trying to really catalog these skills and creating almost like a library for describing all the different skills and trying to get everyone on the same language and using the same sorts of terms, so that it really is universal. And it's great that you're working multi-state. You know, that's certainly the first step, because ultimately, you know, it needs to be something that's a national level, so that people aren't facing different systems depending on where they are in the country.
Right.
Yes, the challenge with respect to this is everybody comes up with their own skills language,
Yes.
each individual institution, and it's often never the language that employers use with in any given industry. So as Nicole mentioned, our affiliate MZ has sort of taken a different approach. They're a labor market analytics firm that's based in Moscow, Idaho. And what they've built two massive databases of job postings on the one hand, which uses machine learning to parse job postings that can actually identify the specific skills that employers are listing in their job postings, and using the technology of the day, actually be able to break that language down into discrete parts. And their clients are institutions, and so they work with institutions, and alongside the job postings, they also have a big database of more than 100 million resumes and social profiles that they pull from the internet as well. And they use the same technology to parse those skills. And so rather than developing a new language that to identify skills, as many institutions have done that have engaged in competency-based education, MZ is trying to develop a sort of mechanism that tries to understand the language that people are already using, especially
Sure.
employers in
A
particular.
more organic approach. Sure.
Exactly.
Because I know Credential Engine is out there doing some other things with codifying the language and the skills associated with certain credentials, but this is yet another approach there. So, all right, it looks like we have a question. It says at Bowling Green State University, we are establishing a process to give credit for industry certifications and credentials that match our course curriculum. It would be really helpful to see the top 25 certifications in terms of frequency of veterans who hold them.
Yes. So that right now we don't have the actual names of the certificates and certifications. We only have the occupational fields. But our next round, that might be something that we're able to provide if we stay in touch, because we have the next iteration of this Gallup survey that's going out right now, and there we're going to be collecting a lot more granular data to do a focused study on what are the names of these certificates and certifications, what what are the fields that they're in, who actually provided them, things like that. So I think that'll be something that's available this summer when we get the data back.
Oh, great.
And we would love to work with you on that.
Fabulous. And I'm hearing that, yes, that would be super helpful.
Great.
As far as the fields, they are, when we're talking about this particular population, that is people who are in a certification but don't have any kind of higher degree, an associate's degree or higher, the more common fields are going to be, of course, transportation. So a commercial driver's license is among the more common.
Right.
Healthcare is incredibly common as well. And I think some of the more the trades, the blue collar trades, are the ones that stand out from some of the other public data sets on certificates and certification that are available.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think for veterans, I mean, again, we don't have that granular detail back yet, but I would not be surprised to see something similar when you have mechanics and you have, healthcare medics, and then you have people licensed to drive these large vehicles.
Sure. Do we have any other questions? Well, I think then I will just remind everyone that if you want to see this webinar or other MAC webinars, please take a look at our resources page under past webinars. And then, of course, any additional information about MCMC is also available on our website at the links you're seeing right now. There's also a Facebook group, another way for you to join the conversation and hear what's going on. And as always, please feel free to contact Sarah Appel, the manager of the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit. And thank you so much to our presenters, Nicole and Andrew, today. And of course, to all of you who joined us, thank you for sharing your day and taking your time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.